It wasn't just the hum of machines that filled the air. It was the sound of justice running forever forward.